You'll never believe what my own family called me at my granddaughter's wedding. Have you ever wondered if the people closest to you would throw you under the bus for money? What if I told you that the answer might be hiding in plain sight, just waiting for the right moment to destroy everything you thought you knew about your family? Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this crazy story reaches. I'm about to tell you something that happened to me that was so shocking, so unbelievable, that it changed my entire life in one single moment. But first, let me back up a little bit. My name is Margaret, and I'm 65 years old. 3 years ago, I lost my husband David to cancer. He was the love of my life for 40 years, and when he died, I thought my world was over. What I didn't know was that my real nightmare was just beginning. See, David left me pretty well off when he passed. Not rich exactly, but comfortable. Comfortable enough that my son Robert and his wife Linda started coming around more often. At first, I thought they were just being caring. Boy, was I wrong. It started small. A request here, a favor there. Mom, we're thinking about redoing the kitchen. Nothing fancy, just updating things a bit. Then came the puppy dog eyes and the sob story about college tuition and tight budgets. Before I knew it, I was writing a check for $30,000. That was just the beginning. Over the next 3 years, I gave them almost $250,000. Kitchen renovations that turned into whole house makeovers. Tuition help that somehow covered luxury cars for both my grandkids when they turned 18. Family vacations that I was invited to join and, surprise, surprise, expected to pay for completely. But I loved my family. I wanted to help. David always said family comes first, right? So I kept writing those checks, even when something in my gut told me this wasn't right. Then came my granddaughter's Jessica's wedding day. I spent extra time getting ready that morning. At 65, I'm not vain, but I wanted to look my best for such a special day. I chose a soft blue dress that David had always loved, styled my silver hair carefully, and even put on a little bit of the perfume he gave me for our last anniversary together. "You look beautiful, Margaret," I told my reflection, imagining David's voice saying those words. For a moment, I could almost feel him there with me. The ceremony at Holy Trinity Church was gorgeous. Jessica looked absolutely stunning walking down the aisle, her face glowing with pure happiness. My son Robert beamed with pride as he walked her down the aisle, and even Linda seemed genuinely emotional. For those few precious moments, everything felt perfect. But then we got to the reception. I walked into the grand ballroom of the Marriott Hotel and made my way to the check-in table where guests were picking up their name tags and table assignments. The young woman at the table smiled brightly as she looked through the alphabetized cards. "Here you are, Mrs. Thompson," she said cheerfully, handing me my name tag. I glanced down, expecting to see Margaret Thompson, granddaughter of the bride, written in elegant script. Instead, what I saw made my blood turn to ice. In beautiful calligraphy, clear as day, were the words, "The old lady who pays for everything." My hand froze halfway to my dress. This had to be a mistake. This couldn't be real. "Is something wrong?" she asked, noticing my expression. I forced a smile, my cheeks burning with humiliation. "There seems to be a mix-up with my name tag." She leaned over to look and her eyes went wide. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me check if there's another one." "It's fine," I said quickly. I didn't want to cause a scene at Jessica's wedding. "I'll speak with my family about it." I pinned that horrible tag to my dress and walked into the ballroom, feeling like everyone was staring at me. Had Jessica approved this? Robert? Linda? Who thought this was appropriate, let alone funny? During the cocktail hour, I tried my best to enjoy myself, chatting with other guests who either didn't notice my name tag or were too polite to mention it. Then I overheard something that made my stomach drop. Did you see the grandmother's name tag? Someone whispered behind me with a snicker. Linda said they thought it would be hilarious. Apparently she's their personal ATM. I moved away quickly, my hands shaking like leaves. Just then, Robert spotted me and waved me over to a group of well-dressed guests. "Mom," he called out, his voice carrying across the room. "Come meet the Johnsons. Dad used to play golf with Bill." I walked over reluctantly. Bill Johnson looked familiar, probably one of David's old business buddies. "Mom, this is Bill and Sarah Johnson," Robert said, then added with a laugh that cut right through me. "Mom's our walking bank account." Sarah Johnson's smile disappeared as she glanced at my name tag. Bill looked super uncomfortable. "Margaret Thompson," I said firmly, extending my hand. "David's widow." "Of course," Bill said kindly. "David talked about you all the time. He was so proud of you." The conversation kept going on, but I barely heard any of it. When the Johnsons walked away, I pulled Robert aside. "What's the meaning of this?" I demanded, pointing to my name tag. He just laughed. "Oh, Mom, don't be so sensitive. It's a joke. Everyone knows you're the one with the deep pockets since Dad left you everything." "It's humiliating," I said quietly. "Oh, please," he rolled his eyes. "Lighten up. It's a party." Before I could respond, Linda appeared, looking elegant in her mother of the bride dress. "There you are, Margaret. Has Robert been introducing you around? We want everyone to know who's responsible for this gorgeous wedding." She winked, and they both laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I excused myself and headed straight for the bathroom, needing a moment alone. As I dabbed at my eyes with the tissue, trying not to mess up my makeup, the door opened. An older man in a well-tailored suit walked in, then immediately backed out. "Mrs. Thompson, Margaret, it's Martin Rodriguez, David's attorney. Could I have a word?" I composed myself and stepped out. Martin had handled David's estate and had always been nothing but kind to me. I couldn't help but notice. He gestured vaguely toward my name tag and some of the comments I've been hearing. I sighed. Apparently, it's just a joke. Martin's expression darkened. "It's not funny, and David would have been absolutely furious." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There's something you should know. Something David made me promise not to tell you unless it became absolutely necessary." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is an addition to David's will. He wrote it shortly before he passed away." I opened it with trembling fingers. The legal language was complicated, but the meaning was crystal clear. Any descendant who publicly humiliated me would lose their entire inheritance from David's estate. An estate that was much, much larger than even I had realized. I looked up at Martin, completely stunned. Why wouldn't he tell me about this? "He hoped it would never be needed," Martin said quietly. "He wanted them to treat you right because they loved you, not because they were afraid of losing their inheritance." I glanced back toward the ballroom where my family was celebrating, completely unaware that their behavior had just cost them millions of dollars. "What do you want to do?" Martin asked. I carefully folded the document and handed it back to him. "Nothing. Not yet. I need to see just how far they'll go." If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Your support means everything to me. As I returned to the reception, that name tag felt heavier against my chest. But instead of shame, I felt something different stirring inside me. A determination to finally see my family for who they really were. The morning after Jessica's wedding, I sat alone at my kitchen table, still in my bathrobe, staring at that offensive name tag. I'd placed it in front of me. "The old lady who pays for everything." I traced the letters with my fingertip. thinking about how David would have reacted if he'd seen it. His temper was rare, but when someone disrespected the people he loved, watch out. They've changed. I whispered to the empty room, as if David could hear me. Or maybe they were always this way and we just didn't want to see it. I got up and walked to the living room, drawn to the big family portrait hanging above the fireplace. It was taken 5 years ago on our 40th anniversary. David sat in the center, still strong despite the early signs of the illness that would eventually take him. I stood beside him, my hand on his shoulder. Robert and Linda were on our left, and Jessica and her brother Tyler, who were teenagers then, stood in front of us. We looked happy. We looked like a real family. When exactly had things changed? The question haunted me as I made my morning coffee. Maybe it had been so gradual, so sneaky that I hadn't noticed until it was too late. The first clear memory hit me like a punch to the gut. It was about 6 months after David's funeral. Robert and Linda had invited me to dinner, which was pretty rare even then. They'd been unusually nice, asking about how I was doing, sharing memories of David. Then over dessert, they'd gotten to the real reason for the dinner. "Mom," Robert said, refilling my wine glass, "Linda and I have been thinking about updating our kitchen. Nothing crazy, just new appliances and countertops." "That sounds lovely," I replied, having no clue what was coming. "The thing is," Linda continued smoothly, "with college tuition for the kids and everything else, we're a bit tight right now." I remembered the pause, the way they both looked at me, expectantly. "Are you asking me for money?" "Not asking," Robert said quickly. "It's just that Dad left you pretty comfortable, and we thought maybe you'd want to help out the family." I wrote them a check for $30,000 that night. Looking back, that was the beginning of the end. Small requests became bigger ones. A kitchen remodel became a whole house renovation. Tuition help became luxury cars for both Jessica and Tyler when they turned 18. Family vacations that I was invited to join and expected to fund completely. I opened the hallway closet and pulled out a box of financial records. Sitting on the floor like a little kid, I started going through bank statements and canceled checks. The evidence of my financial support for Robert and Linda's lifestyle was absolutely overwhelming. Over 3 years, I had given them nearly $250,000. The phone rang, interrupting my depressing math. It was Linda. "Margaret, are you home? I've been calling your cell phone." I hadn't even noticed my cell phone was still in my evening purse. "Yes, I'm home. Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect. Robert and I just wanted to thank you for everything yesterday. Wasn't the wedding absolutely beautiful?" "Yes, it was lovely. Jessica and Mark are so grateful for your generosity. They couldn't have had such a wonderful wedding without you." I was happy to help. "Actually, that's partly why I'm calling. Mark's parents were supposed to pay for the honeymoon, but his father's business has been struggling and they've had to back out. Jessica is just heartbroken." I could see what was coming from a mile away. "We were wondering if you might be able to help. They've got their hearts set on 2 weeks in Hawaii. Robert and I would contribute, of course, but with everything we spent on the wedding..." "Everything they spent? I had covered almost all of it." "I'll think about it," I said, surprising both of us with my non-committal response. There was a pause. "Oh, well, they need to book soon to get the best rates." "I understand. I'll let you know tomorrow." After hanging up, I went back to my financial detective work. David had always warned me about Robert's relationship with money. "He sees it as the solution to everything," he told me once. "But money without values just creates more problems." I hadn't understood then. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to understand. A knock at the door made me jump. Through the peephole, I saw Tyler, my grandson, shifting nervously on the porch. I quickly gathered up all the scattered financial papers and shoved them back in the closet before opening the door. "Grandma," he said, stepping forward to give me a hug. At 21, he was tall like his grandfather, with the same kind eyes. "Are you okay? I've been texting you." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a bit tired after yesterday. Come in." He followed me to the kitchen where I put the kettle on for fresh tea. Tyler had always been different from the rest of them, more thoughtful, less focused on appearances and money. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday," he said, sitting at the table. "The name tag, the way everyone was talking, it wasn't right." I felt a lump form in my throat. "You noticed?" "Of course I noticed. So did a lot of people." He looked down, embarrassed. "I should have said something." I patted his hand. "It's not your job to correct your parents." "But it is my job to stand up for what's right," he said, looking at me directly. "Dad and Mom, they've changed since Grandpa died. Or maybe I just didn't see it before. All they talk about is money. Your money specifically." "What do you mean?" Tyler hesitated. "Last week, I overheard them talking about your house. Dad said something about how it's too big for one person and how they could help you downsize." The kettle whistled, giving me a moment to process this information. As I poured hot water over the tea bags, I thought about Martin Rodriguez and the addition to David's will. I thought about the name tag, the constant requests for money, and now this apparent plan to get me out of my home. "Grandma," Tyler's voice brought me back to the present. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I've better than okay, Tyler. I think I'm finally seeing things clearly for the first time in years." "What do you mean?" I smiled, making a decision. Just that it's time for some changes around here. As we sipped our tea, I found myself studying my grandson's face, wondering if he was truly different from his parents, or if the seeds of entitlement were just sleeping, waiting for the right moment to grow. For the first time since David died, I felt a cold, clear determination replace my grief and loneliness. I wouldn't be making any quick decisions, but I would be watching and waiting to see who in my family truly deserved the legacy David had left behind. 3 days after the wedding, Robert and Linda organized a post-wedding brunch at their country club. I thought about not going, but curiosity won. I wanted to see if the name tag thing had been a one-time mistake or part of a bigger pattern. I arrived at the Riverside Country Club dressed in a simple but elegant cream pantsuit that David had always said made me look like royalty. As I walked into the private dining room, I noticed several guests from the wedding, including Jessica and her new husband Mark, Tyler, and various relatives and friends. "Mom, over here," Robert called, waving me toward the head table. Linda, looking stunning in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, gave me an air kiss. "Margaret, you look nice," she said, her tone suggesting she was mildly surprised. "We saved you a seat right here," she added, pointing to a chair next to Mark's parents, whom I barely knew, rather than near my grandchildren. The brunch went smoothly enough until Linda clinked her glass for attention. We want to thank everyone for coming today and for helping make Jessica and Mark's wedding so special. And of course, a special thank you to Grandma Margaret, who has been so incredibly generous. All eyes turned to me. In fact, Linda continued, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, we have an exciting announcement. Grandma has agreed to fund Jessica and Mark's dream honeymoon to Hawaii. There was scattered applause. I sat frozen, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. I'd made no such commitment. Mom, prompted Robert, when I didn't immediately smile and wave. I carefully set my cup down. This is the first I'm hearing of it, I said, keeping my voice level. An awkward silence fell over the table. Jessica looked confused, then embarrassed. Mark stared at his plate like it might have answers. Well, we discussed it yesterday. Remember? You said you'd think about it. Yes, I did say that. And I'm still thinking. Robert leaned over, speaking in a stage whisper that was clearly meant to be heard by everyone. Mom, don't make a scene. We've already told them they can book the trip. I felt something inside me snap, a thread that had been stretched too tight for too long. I don't recall agreeing to pay for a honeymoon to Hawaii, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. In fact, I believe Mark and Rodriguez's parents were originally planning to cover this expense. Mark's father shifted uncomfortably. There were some business setbacks, he muttered. I understand, I said kindly. These things happen, but I think it's inappropriate to publicly volunteer someone else's money without their agreement, don't you? The table fell dead silent. Linda's face turned bright red. Their means? She hissed. What about your means? Everyone knows David left you more than comfortable. Something in her tone, the entitlement, the resentment, made my decision crystal clear. My financial situation is not up for public discussion, and neither are my spending choices. Robert grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. Mom, stop it. You're embarrassing us. I pulled my arm away. No, Robert, you've embarrassed yourselves. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. Jessica, Mark, I wish you both every happiness. I'd be happy to contribute to a reasonable honeymoon, but I'll discuss that with you privately. As I turned to leave, Tyler stood up too. I'll walk you out, Grandma. In the lobby, away from all those staring eyes, I finally let my composure slip. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my car keys. Are you okay to drive? Tyler asked gently. I nodded, taking a deep breath. I'm fine, just a bit shaken. You should be proud of yourself. That took real courage. I looked at my grandson, really looked at him. And that moment, he reminded me so much of David. It made my heart ache. Would you like to come over for dinner tonight? I asked impulsively. Tyler smiled. I'd like that a lot. Quick reminder to smash that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories like this. There's so much more coming. Later that evening, as we sat in my kitchen, sharing a simple meal of roast chicken, I found myself telling Tyler about his parents' behavior over the past 3 years. The constant financial demands, the gradual loss of respect. I'm not surprised, he said sadly. I've been watching it happen. After Grandpa died, it was like they saw you as, I don't know, an ATM, I supplied. He nodded. And it's getting worse. Last week, I overheard them talking about your house again. What did they say? Tyler hesitated. They were discussing how to convince you to move into Golden Years, that retirement home downtown. Dad said it would be better for everyone if you downsized. He mentioned something about the real estate market being hot and how they could help you maximize your investment. I felt sick. They weren't just after my money, they wanted my home too. Tyler, there's something I need to tell you, I said, deciding to trust him with the truth about David's addition to the will. But before I could continue, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Robert's car in the driveway. "It's your father," I said. Tyler's expression hardened. "You don't have to answer it." But I was done hiding. "No, I think it's time we cleared the air." I opened the door to find Robert standing there, his face red with anger. "What the hell was that performance at brunch?" he demanded, pushing past me into the hallway. Then he spotted Tyler. "What are you doing here?" "Having dinner with Grandma, something the rest of you might try sometime, without asking for money." Robert's face got even redder. "Stay ahead of this, Tyler. This is between your mother and me." "No," I said firmly. "If we're going to have this conversation, Tyler stays. I'm tired of the private manipulations, Robert. Let's put everything on the table." And in that moment, looking at my son's angry face and my grandson's protective stance, I knew we had reached the point of no return. There would be no going back. "I've had enough of your attitude, Mom. First the scene at the brunch, and now I find you've been turning Tyler against us." I sat calmly in David's old recliner, hands folded in my lap. Tyler stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, watching his father with a mixture of disappointment and determination. "No one is turning anyone against you," I replied evenly. "We're simply acknowledging what's been happening in this family since your father died." "And what exactly is that?" Robert demanded. "You and Linda have been treating Grandma like a bank, not a person," Tyler said before I could answer. "The name tag at the wedding, volunteering her to pay for Jessica's honeymoon without asking first, talking about selling her house behind her back. You've been spying on us." Robert's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "I've been paying attention," Tyler shot back. "Something you might try sometime." Robert turned to me, his expression shifting to that fake concern tone he always used when he wanted something. "Mom, you're misunderstanding everything. We're just trying to help you manage your finances wisely. You're not getting any younger." "And I'm 65, Robert, not 95. My mind is perfectly sharp, and I'm more than capable of managing my own affairs." "But David left you so much money." "Stop." I held up my hand. "David left me exactly what he intended to leave me. His estate is not a family piggy bank." Robert's fake smile vanished completely. "So what are you saying? You're cutting us off because Linda made one stupid joke with a name tag?" "I'm saying that from now on, I'll be making my own decisions about my money and my home. If Jessica and Mark want a honeymoon in Hawaii, they can save for it like most young couples do. If you and Linda want a bigger house, you can work for it." Robert stared at me like I had suddenly started speaking Chinese. Then he turned to Tyler. "I want to speak to my mother alone." "I'm staying," Tyler said firmly. "This is family business." "Exactly," Tyler replied. "And I'm family. Something you seem to have forgotten." Something shifted in Robert's expression, a calculation, a reassessment. He'd always been able to manipulate me when we were alone, graying on my emotions, my grief for David, my desire to keep the peace. But with Tyler there, those tactics wouldn't work. "Fine," he snapped, heading for the door. "But this isn't over, Mom. Not by a long shot." After he left, Tyler let out a long breath. "I'm sorry, Grandma. For what, sweetheart? You've done nothing wrong. For not standing up sooner. For letting them treat you this way. I got up and hugged him tightly. You're standing up now. That's what matters. After Tyler left, I sat in the quiet of my home, thinking about David, about the addition to his will, about the family we'd raised together. Had we gone wrong somewhere with Robert, or had he always had this streak of entitlement that we had failed to see? More importantly, what was I going to do now? The answer came slowly, taking shape in my mind like a photo developing. Instead of confronting Robert and Linda directly with the legal document, which would only make them change their behavior out of fear rather than genuine respect, I would simply let them continue showing their true colors. Meanwhile, I would quietly reclaim my life and my independence. The next morning, I called Martin Rodriguez. "Margaret," he answered warmly, "I've been hoping to hear from you after the wedding." "Yes, that's partly why I'm calling." I explained what had happened at the brunch and Robert's visit afterward. "I need to understand exactly what David left in his will, Martin. Not just the addition, but everything." There was a pause. "Perhaps this would be better discussed in person. Could you come to my office this afternoon?" 3 hours later, I sat across from Martin in his well-appointed office as he explained the full extent of David's estate. The numbers took my breath away. David built several companies over his lifetime and sold them at exactly the right moments. His investments were extremely conservative, which means they weathered all the economic ups and downs beautifully. "I knew we were comfortable," I said faintly, "but this—" "David was a very private man when it came to money," Martin smiled. "He didn't believe in showing off wealth. He always said you married him when he had nothing but potential and a beat-up Honda, so he never wanted you to become one of those women who only care about designer bags and country club drama." I laughed softly, hearing David's voice in those words. That sounds exactly like him. As for the addition to the will, it's straightforward but powerful. Any descendant who publicly humiliates you loses their entire inheritance. The name tag incident at the wedding would certainly qualify. And the brunch situation? That too, most likely. "But Martin, you don't have to make any decisions right now. The addition remains in effect for your lifetime." I nodded, thinking, what if I wanted to make some changes of my own, to my will, to how my assets are managed? Martin leaned forward. "What did you have in mind?" By the time I left Martin's office, I had a plan. No dramatic confrontations, no ultimatums. Just quiet reclaiming of my life and my power. First, I called my old friend Eleanor, whom I hadn't seen much since David's death. We arranged to meet for lunch the following day. Then I stopped by the community center and picked up a brochure for their adult education classes. David had always encouraged me to pursue my interest in painting. Maybe it was time. At home, I sat at my computer and started researching small business loans. Tyler had mentioned wanting to open a bookstore after college, but was worried about startup cost. A real investment in my grandson's future seemed like a perfect use of some of my resources. When my phone rang and I saw it was Linda, I let it go to voicemail. The old Margaret would have answered immediately, anxious about what emergency or demand might be coming. But that Margaret was disappearing, replaced by a woman who was finally recognizing her own worth. The voicemail, when I listened to it later, was exactly what I expected. "Margaret, it's Linda. Robert told me about your conversation last night. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We've always had your best interest at heart. Robert and I were thinking we should have dinner this weekend to clear the air. Oh, and Jessica mentioned you'd reconsidered about the honeymoon. They really need to book soon to get the best rates. Call me back. I deleted the message without returning the call. Instead, I opened my checkbook and wrote a modest check as a wedding gift for Jessica and Mark. Enough for a nice honeymoon, but maybe in the mountains of Colorado, not Hawaii. I put it in a card with a warm note wishing them happiness, then sealed the envelope. My quiet strategy had begun. No confrontations, no drama. Just quiet, firm boundaries. David would have approved. 6 months passed in a blur of quiet but huge changes. I enrolled in painting classes at the community center, reconnected with old friends, and spent more time with Tyler, who visited regularly. I provided him with seed money for his bookstore business plan, which was coming along beautifully. Meanwhile, Robert and Linda's attitude towards me swung back and forth between icy distance and desperate attempts to get back in my good graces. When the silent treatment didn't work, they would suddenly appear with fake smiles and obvious excuses to visit. Each time, they would eventually steer the conversation towards money, a renovation they were planning, Jessica's desire to buy a house with Mark, their own retirement concerns. Each time, I politely declined to discuss my finances. It became my favorite phrase, delivered with a smile that grew more confident each time I said it. They didn't take the rejection well. Linda's texts became increasingly nasty. Robert's calls got more demanding. But I had found a new strength in my silence and the boundaries I was finally enforcing. Today was my birthday, my 66th, and despite my protests, Tyler had insisted on organizing a small family gathering at my home. "It's time they remember whose house this is," he'd said with a grim determination that reminded me so much of David. I spent the morning in my garden, deadheading roses and finding peace in the simple task. The garden had been another casualty of the past 3 years. I'd neglected it while catering to Robert and Linda's constant demands. Now it was coming back to life, much like I was. By mid-afternoon, my home was ready for guests. Tyler arrived early to help with final preparations. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked, arranging cheese and crackers on a platter. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing my new dress, a bold red I never would have chosen before. Besides, it's just dinner. But we both knew it was more than that. This was the first time in months that the entire family would be together under my roof. Robert and Linda, Jessica and her new husband Mark, Tyler, and even a few of David's old friends, including Martin Rodriguez. The doorbell rang exactly at 5. Robert and Linda stood on the porch, their smiles so fake I could practically hear the plastic creaking. "Happy birthday, Mom," Robert said, handing me a bouquet of grocery store flowers. "Margaret, you look different," Linda added, her eyes taking in my new dress, my styled hair, and the subtle makeup I learned to apply in a class at the community center. "Thank you," I said simply, stepping back to let them in. Jessica and Mark arrived moments later, followed by Martin and another couple who had been close friends with David and me. I moved through the greetings and small talk with the composure I would have found impossible 6 months ago. As we settled in the dining room, I couldn't help but notice Robert's eyes moving around the house, assessing, calculating. Linda's gaze kept returning to the new painting hanging on the wall, a landscape I'd created myself. "Did you redecorate, Margaret?" she asked, her tone suggesting she found the changes disturbing. "Just a few updates," I replied. "I've been taking painting classes." "Painting classes?" Robert echoed, like I'd said I was learning to tightrope walk. Grandma's really talented, Tyler said proudly. She's already sold 2 pieces at the community art fair. Sold? Linda looked genuinely confused. But why would you need to sell paintings? I smiled. It's not about need, Linda. It's about joy. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table, broken by Mark asking about the bookstore Tyler was planning to open. It's coming along great, Tyler said. Thanks to Grandma, I've got the business plan finalized and I'm looking at locations. Robert's head snapped up. Thanks to Grandma? What does that mean? Tyler met his father's gaze steadily. Grandma's investing in my bookstore. Investing? Robert's voice rose. With what money? My money, I said quietly. Robert started to say something, then caught himself, glancing at the other guests. Maybe we should discuss this privately, Mom. There's nothing to discuss. I'm making my own financial decisions now. Robert's face darkened dark. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Jessica interrupted with the story about their honeymoon to the Grand Canyon, the destination they'd chosen after receiving my modest gift. The conversation shifted, tension temporarily eased. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Linda cornered me in the kitchen. Margaret, what's going on with you? She demanded in a harsh whisper. First, you refused to help with the honeymoon, then we hear nothing from you for months, and now you're throwing money at Tyler's ridiculous pipe dream? It's not a pipe dream, I replied calmly. It's a solid business plan. Don't be naive. Bookstores aren't profitable anymore. He's using you. No, Linda, I'm supporting my grandson's ambition. There's a difference. Her eyes narrowed. Robert and I have been talking. We think it's time you consider moving somewhere more manageable. Golden Years has lovely apartments, and the money from selling this house could help all of us. So there it was. The plan Tyler had overheard, now brought into the open. This house isn't for sale, I said firmly, and my living arrangements aren't up for family discussion. Before she could respond, Robert appeared in the doorway. Everything okay in here? Just wonderful, I said, picking up the cake I'd baked that morning. Shall we have dessert in the living room? Robert cleared his throat as I began cutting the cake. Before we move on, Mom, there's something Linda and I want to discuss with everyone. My hand froze on the cake knife. This wasn't part of the evening I had planned. We've been concerned about Mom's decision-making lately. She's making unwise financial choices, isolating herself, and refusing family guidance. A stunned silence fell over the room. We think it's time to consider a power of attorney arrangement for her own protection. Martín Rodriguez set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. That's a serious step, Robert. Do you have evidence of diminished capacity? She's giving away money to fund a bookstore in the digital age, and she's refusing to consider sensible downsizing options. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This moment had been inevitable from the day I'd started saying no. Your mother seems perfectly competent to me, Martín observed. Making decisions you disagree with is not evidence of incapacity. You don't understand, Robert insisted, his voice rising. She's always relied on Dad and then on me for financial guidance. Now, suddenly she's making these irrational choices? Enough. I set down the cake knife. I am not irrational, incapacitated, or in need of your guidance, Robert. Mom, be reasonable. I've been reasonable for 3 years. I've paid for renovations, vacations, cars, and a wedding. I've allowed you to treat me like a walking checkbook rather than your mother. But that stops now. Robert's face flushed dark red. Is this what you want? He demanded, gesturing around the table. To humiliate us in front of everyone? To make us look like villains? No, Robert, I said quietly. You've managed that all on your own. You selfish old woman, he hissed, standing up so fast his chair nearly fell over. After everything we've done for you? Robert, Linda tugged at his arm, suddenly aware of how this looked to the others. But Robert was beyond caring. You think you can just cut us off? Dad would be ashamed of you. It was at that precise moment that Martín Rodriguez cleared his throat and spoke the words that would change everything. Actually, Robert, David anticipated this exact situation. The silence that followed Martín's words was absolutely deafening. Robert stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, as Martín reached into his jacket and removed a familiar envelope. David added a clause to his will shortly before he passed, Martín explained to the stunned room. He was concerned about how Margaret might be treated after he was gone. What kind of clause? Linda demanded first. Martín looked to me, silently asking permission. I nodded. The clause states that any descendant who publicly humiliates Margaret forfeits their entire inheritance. This includes treating her with disrespect, attempting to control her finances against her wishes, or trying to force her from her home. That's ridiculous, Robert sputtered. Dad would never. He did, Martín interrupted, and as executor of his estate, I've been documenting the incidents over the past several months. He turned to me. Margaret, I have to ask, do you want to enforce the clause? All eyes turned to me. I looked at Robert and Linda, their faces now pale with shock and dawning horror. I looked at Jessica, who seemed confused and embarrassed. Then I looked at Tyler, whose expression held nothing but quiet support. Yes, I said finally, I do. Robert collapsed back into his chair. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, I replied. The name tag at the wedding, the honeymoon announcement at the brunch, the constant demands for money, and now this attempt to declare me incompetent. All of it stops today. But our inheritance, Linda whispered. Is forfeit, Martin confirmed. All of it. What about Jessica and Mark? Linda asked desperately. They haven't done anything wrong. Martin consulted his notes. Jessica was present at several incidents, but didn't actively participate in the humiliation. However, she also never spoke up to defend Margaret. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have said something at the wedding about the name tag. I reached across the table and took her hand. We all make mistakes, sweetheart. The question is what we learn from them. So what happens now? Mark asked, putting his arm around Jessica. According to the terms of the clause, Martin said, Robert and Linda's share of David's estate is redistributed. To whom? Robert demanded. Half goes to Margaret outright, Martin explained. The other half is divided among descendants who've shown proper respect and care. All eyes turned to Tyler, who looked genuinely surprised. I didn't know, he said quickly. I swear, Grandma, I had no idea about any of this. I know, sweetheart, I assured him. Your grandfather would be proud of the man you've become. Robert stood up again, his face twisted with anger. This is a setup, a conspiracy. I'll contest it in court. You're welcome to try, Martin said calmly, but the clause is legally binding, and we have ample evidence of the conditions being met. Margaret, Linda began, her voice suddenly honey-sweet. Surely we can work this out as a family. We never meant. Save it, Linda. It's too late for that. So that's it, Robert demanded. After everything we've done for you, you're just cutting us off? No, Robert, I said, standing to face my son directly. After everything I've done for you, I'm finally standing up for myself. There's a difference. The gathering ended shortly after that. Jessica and Mark left with awkward apologies and promises to call soon. Robert and Linda stormed out without another word. Martin and the other guests made tactful exits, leaving just Tyler and me in the sudden quiet of my home. Are you okay? He asked, helping me clear the barely touched dessert plates. I'm better than okay, I replied, surprised to find it was true. I feel free. 1 year later, I stood in the doorway of Chapter 1, the bookstore Tyler had finally opened in a charming converted house downtown. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, lighting up shelves of carefully chosen books and comfortable reading corners. A coffee counter run by Tyler's girlfriend Emma served locally roasted coffee and homemade pastries. In the children's section, a mural I'd painted covered one wall, a magical forest scene with hidden animals and fairy houses for young readers to discover. Twice a week, I led story time for neighborhood children, something I never imagined myself doing before. The small apartment upstairs had been renovated too. Not for me. I still loved my home with its memories of David, but for a young writer in residence program Tyler had established with part of his inheritance. The bell over the door chimed, and Jessica stepped in, pushing a stroller with her 3-month-old daughter Davina, named after her grandfather. Grandma, Jessica called, spotting me. I didn't know you'd be here today. Just dropping off some new bookmarks I painted, I said, bending to admire baby Davina. Hello, little one. Over the past year, Jessica and I had slowly rebuilt our relationship. After the initial shock of the inheritance revelation, she'd made genuine efforts to connect with me independently of her parents. Mark had proven to be a steadying influence, encouraging her to form her own opinions rather than echoing her mother's. Robert and Linda were a different story. After several failed attempts to contest the clause, they had moved to Arizona, where Robert had taken a job with a former business partner. Our communication was limited to Christmas cards and occasional updates through Jessica. Have you heard from your parents lately? I asked, as Jessica settled at a small table with the baby. Mom called last week, she said with a sigh. Same conversation as always. Complaints about Dad's job, the small house they had to settle for, how everything is unfair. I'm sorry. Don't be, Jessica said firmly. They made their choices. I've made mine. Emma brought over coffee and fresh muffins, cooing over the baby before returning to the counter. Tyler emerged from the back room with a stack of new books, his face lighting up when he saw us. Perfect timing, he said, joining us at the table. I wanted to run something by you both. He explained his idea for expanding the store's community programs, literacy tutoring for adults and writing workshops for teens. It would mean reinvesting some of the profits, he added, but I think it's worth it. I think it's wonderful, I said, feeling a surge of pride. As they discussed the details, I gazed around the sunlit bookstore. This beautiful space represented not just Tyler's dream, but a new chapter for all of us. In the years since the revelation, I'd discovered parts of myself that had been sleeping for too long. I'd made new friends, developed my painting, even started traveling. Simple weekend trips at first, then 2 weeks in Italy with a senior tour group where I'd met Charles, a widower from Boston with kind eyes and a dry sense of humor, who called me every Sunday now. David would have approved, I thought, not just of the bookstore or my newfound independence, but of the boundaries I'd finally established. He had tried to protect me with his legal clause, but in the end, I had learned to protect myself. Jessica's baby let out a happy gurgle, drawing me back to the present. This was my family now. Not perfect, not complete, but real. We were building something new from the pieces of what had been lost, and it was, in its own way, beautiful. What do you think, Grandma? Tyler asked, pulling me into the conversation. I smiled at my grandson and granddaughter, at the baby who represented our future, at the bookstore that had grown from trust and respect rather than obligation and greed. I think, I said, that this is exactly where we're supposed to be. As I sat there surrounded by books and family and the warm smell of coffee, I realized something that would have shocked the broken woman I'd been just 2 years ago. I wasn't just surviving without Robert and Linda's constant demands and drama. I was thriving. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the courage to say no to the people who take you for granted. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when it hurts. And sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the family you're born into. David always used to say that money doesn't change people. It just reveals who they really are. He was right about that, just like he was right about so many things. The name tag at Jessica's wedding called me the old lady who pays for everything. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was Margaret Thompson, artist, grandmother, business investor, and finally, after 66 years on this earth, completely and utterly myself. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. Thanks for watching my story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that will blow your mind. And don't forget to tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from all over the country.